Hello, this is my week 9 discussion video. For this week, we were allowed to choose two movies, one older and one newer, and compare and contrast. And I thought, what better movies to choose than movies from Disney? And so I chose Cinderella and Tangled. And it was very insightful, and it was very interesting to look at these through the lens of power. Now, I should probably preface and say that I have listened or watched these movies plenty of times before. Tangled is definitely one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. I've watched it a lot of times. For Cinderella, I mean, I've been told by my parents that I watched that movie a lot when I was a kid. I didn't really remember a whole lot, to be honest. A lot of it felt like watching it brand new, and so um, that was an interesting experience. And part of the reason why I chose these is because they're two very similar stories, but they represent very different times in um, U.S. history, and especially in terms of culture and how women are treated. Um, you know, Cinderella came out in 1950, and Tangled came out in 2010, 60 years apart. And so a lot has changed in feminism and for women in the United States in those 60 years. And so, I totally recommend to other people like watching these two movies side by side because it is very interesting. Um, the only thing I would say is that the only thing that kind of held me up was that I thought about doing a movie like Moana or Frozen that's even more new than Tangled, just because I've noticed in the last 10, 11 years that Disney movies have gotten even more feminist. We're starting to see movies about young princesses who do not end up having a love interest, which is not the case for Tangled. And so I was thinking seriously about using Moana for this, and the stories just are very different. And so I thought it would be more fun to look at two stories that are extremely similar. In fact, something I didn't even realize until I started this project is that both stories contain instances of the princesses being confined. For Rapunzel is in her tower, and for Cinderella, she is stuck at her house, and then eventually the evil stepmom locks her in her room so that the Archduke can't find her. And so, the power dynamics are pretty obvious. In Cinderella, she really doesn't have any. Nor does she really seem too interested in having any. Like, she really doesn't take matters into her own hands. Everything and everyone kind of falls into place for her. The fairy godmother really does a lot of the work. The mice and birds do a lot of the work for her. She's just kind of like a passive person who's there, which was really not the case in Tangled, and I was very happy to see that Rapunzel really does a good job of taking matters into her own hands. She's interested in finding her own power within her own self, and she carries it out. I mean, she goes against her mom's orders, and her mother Gothel's orders, and she goes out into the world to find the floating lanterns, and she uses the crown that Flynn Rider is after as leverage over him. So there's a power dynamic in their relationship as well until the end when they fall in love. And she's determined and she makes it work. She really perseveres, especially when Flynn takes her into the Snuggly Duckling, which is a bar that is not very snuggly or happy, and she gets very intimidated. They're about to attack her and Flynn, and she stands up for herself. Flynn doesn't really do much. So it's funny. Like, it's fun to watch these moments. These are kids' movies, again, in very different parts of United States history, and before the feminist movement and after many feminist movements. And so there's a lot to unpack in terms of power. Overall, I really enjoyed watching these two movies together, and I had a very different experience watching them together through the lens of power.